of a leadership academy at Grand Valley State University where we study you and try to understand your success. I'd like to hear from each of you, what was the key to your leadership? How did you get where you got, and how did you lead? I guess, what was the key characteristic that made people look to you for leadership?
Would you like to lead off, Tom?
Well, sir, I think appropriately so, as you have ever remained an icon of proper and devoted leadership for myself, let alone for the nation. I know, sir, that we've had various disagreements, but you always recognize, sir, that as Americans we can agree to disagree, and you've always encouraged in the midst of the disagreements that we continue that most noble representation of who we are to the rest of the world, that we can pursue through our disagreements compromise and resolution for the common good. You exemplified to me that indeed the integrity of one's personal character is essential for a leader, that emanates more than anything else, somewhat as a halo to everyone else in observation. And as well, you have always exemplified to me that in every sense of the word, that you remained a very good, and a very wise man. Perhaps, sir, if you will, for me, personally, in that light, I consider leadership to represent not one's own personal commentary on their achievements, no, nay, indeed, but rather one's own personal commentary on the achievements of others. And though I've been recognized as surely one responsible for the purchase of over 830,000 square miles west of the Mississippi, purchase of the island of New Orleans, which gains us the control of one of the mightiest waterways upon the globe, nay, even in the midst of the attacks by the Federalists, that I usurped the authority of my office in that effort. Oh, the Louisiana Treaty could not be solely ratified by me. When it arrived to my desk on the 14th of July, 1803, it proceeded right where the Constitution says it should go. The Senate. The Senate. It was the achievement of the Senate of the United States. And the negotiations which led to it in France were not attended to by me, no. Those negotiations were attended by two particular individuals, one not even of our soil. The one successful individual in those negotiations was indeed my fellow committeeman on the committee to draft our Declaration of American Independence, the gentleman I appointed Minister Plenipotentiary to France, Robert R. Livingston. And the other, a Frenchman himself, who was welcome to seek an asylum on our soil, who brought his two sons here that they might indeed begin to taste the sweetness of liberty, and one of them to engage the manufacture of the finest gunpowder the world could possibly know for our defense. That gentleman, who was a friend of General Bonaparte and later became one of his personal bankers during his rise to his self-proclaimed royal office, that gentleman was Pierre Samuel Dupont. It was Monsieur Dupont who helped me to understand, rather than to attempt to raise arms and thereby claim the Mississippi, let alone the land to the west, why not let it be suggested these United States will be willing to purchase New Orleans and the territory of Louisiana? Though it took me some time to make up my mind, sir, I did finally have to acquiesce and thereby accept what indeed seemed the more practicable. I make these statements in your presence, in the presence of my fellow chief magistrates, in the presence of all of you, honestly and sincerely, because, if you will, sir, I do believe that the true art in government is simply in being honest.
There is no big trick to leadership, really. There are certain principles that one must follow. For instance, judge everybody on their merit and not who they are. Surround yourself with knowledgeable people and study history. The nation's possibility of achieving greatness lies in the present. And nothing helps it more to achieve that possible greatness than its consciousness of past achievements and past mistakes. You learn from things. I'll give you one short example. When I first went out to the Dakotas, I was quite a character, quite a sight. In my buckskin outfit, and my Tiffany hunting knife, my wide sombrero. But when I blurted out, "Hasten forward there, hasten forward," one of the first roundups, I was laughed at. Imagine that. But I quickly gained the respect from the cowboys out there because I held my own. I put in the same hours, suffered the same hardships. I went into a saloon to check into the hotel above in the town of Mingus. There were shots as I approached the building. There was a bully, drunk out of his mind, and shot the clock off the wall. I went in, sat down, and minded my own business. Right away, he fixated on me and said something to the effect, "I say, Four Eyes, you're buying the house the next round." Is that worth getting into a fight over? See, good leadership is know when and when not to use force. He repeated, "I said you're buying the house the next round." Still not worth getting into a fight over. But if you're able to take care of yourself, don't hesitate to take care of yourself. I gave him about as much rope as I was going to give him. I got up, led with a right, and followed through with a solid left, and knocked him out cold. And ever since then, I've been known as Old Four Eyes. These are a few points that I pass on to you about leadership. Use them wisely.
Well, I think that leadership is in the eyes of the beholder, what he or she sees in another individual to consider leadership. But I think one of them is determination, stick-to-itiveness, see it through. And certainly when I was president, if we were going to have this union, we had to see it through in the darkest times. And in those times in December of 1862, following a terrible defeat at Chancellorsville, I had to tell the press, I had to tell the wounded who survived Chancellorsville, or Fredericksburg as I should have said, that there was going to be a turnaround, and we were going to come back, and we were going to win this thing. When we came to December after Fredericksburg, and I said Chancellorsville earlier, I meant Fredericksburg, that was the most dismal time of the war. And yet we had to pick ourselves up and go on. And I learned some of that from the man on my far right, because of all the accolades that will go down to George Washington, and how people will remember him at his beloved Mount Vernon, and all of the things he did to start this country and to get us underway. There has to be one date in his mind that would be the darkest, that he would never, never forget. And that was September the 11th. Because in September the 11th, 1777, this man was at Brandywine with his troops. General Howe, the British Army, came by vessel up the Chesapeake, offloaded, and almost annihilated him on September the 11th. He was able to pull his troops back to Paoli. Suddenly the British turned and let them alone and marched into Philadelphia. So we can have bad times. I had mine, he had his. Mr. Jefferson certainly had his. And Mr. Roosevelt would tell us about some of his difficult times. They happen to all of us. It's whether you're down and pick yourself back up and demonstrate that to your colleagues and the people who are relying on you for leadership.
You know, Mr. Lincoln, when you talk about Brandywine Creek and our loss there, and General Sir William Howe's conquering of Philadelphia, our nation's capital, I am put in mind in a humorous fashion of the news reaching Dr. Benjamin Franklin that General Howe had captured Philadelphia. Franklin was in Paris. Franklin said, "General Howe has not captured Philadelphia. Philadelphia has captured General Howe." That is a story for another day. But I do not disagree with anything these gentlemen have said with regard to leadership.